The small town of Pine Creek wasn't known for much. Nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, it was the kind of place most people drove through without a second glance. But to Abby Chen it was home, and her small cafe on Main Street was the beating heart of her world. The Bluebird Cafe had been her parents' dream long before it became hers. The morning light filtered through the worn blue curtains, casting gentle shadows across the weathered wooden floors. Abby wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, a habit she'd picked up from her mother. The familiar scent of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the air, a comforting constant in her increasingly uncertain life. "You're going to wear a hole in that counter," called Maggie, the elderly waitress who'd been serving customers since before Abby was born. Her voice was rough from years of early mornings and late nights, but her eyes still sparkled with the same warmth they always had. Abby smiled weakly. "Just making sure everything's perfect." But perfection wouldn't pay the bills. 6 months after her parents' car accident, Abby was still trying to find her footing. The cafe had been left to her, along with its mounting debts and dwindling customer base. The new highway that bypassed Pine Creek had taken most of the passing traffic with it, and the local economy was struggling to adjust. She glanced at the stack of unpaid invoices tucked beneath the register. The electricity bill was marked with an angry red final notice, and the food supplier had already called twice that week. Abby had been putting off decisions she couldn't avoid much longer. The bell above the door jingled, pulling Abby from her thoughts. Tom Baker, the town's postal worker, entered with his usual greeting. "Morning, Abby." "The usual, please." "Coming right up," she replied, already pouring his black coffee and plating a slice of apple pie. Some routines were sacred in Pine Creek. As Tom settled at his regular table by the window, Abby's phone buzzed with a text from the bank. Another automatic payment had bounced. She shoved the phone back into her apron pocket, forcing a smile as she served Tom his breakfast. "How's business?" he asked between bites. "Oh, taking it one day at a time." The lie came easily now. Nobody needed to know how close she was to losing everything. The morning crawled by with only a handful of regulars stopping in. By noon, Abby was calculating whether she could afford to keep Maggie for the afternoon shift, or if she'd need to cover it herself to save on wages. "Why don't you head home early?" Abby suggested to Maggie as the lunch rush. All 3 customers dwindled. "It's pretty quiet today." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "You trying to do everything yourself again?" "I'm fine, really. Just thought you might want some time off." The older woman's expression softened. "Your parents didn't build this place by working themselves to the bone, you know. They knew when to ask for help." She squeezed Abby's hand briefly before hanging up her apron. "Don't stay too late. The world won't end if you close early once in a while." After Maggie left, Abby busied herself with prep work for the next day. Chopping vegetables, she lost herself in memories of watching her father's skilled hands performing the same tasks. His deep laugh filling the kitchen as he told stories of his childhood in Hong Kong. Her mother would be at the front, charming customers with her quick wit and genuine interest in their lives. They'd built the cafe from nothing, a testament to hard work and community. Now it was slipping away, and Abby didn't know how to stop it. The afternoon stretched on with occasional customers, mostly locals who'd been coming to the Bluebird since it opened 20 years ago. Abby served them with the same care her parents had always shown, remembering preferences and asking about families. In Pine Creek, a cafe wasn't just a business, it was a gathering place, a living room for the community. By 6 o'clock, rain had started to fall, pattering against the windows and driving away any potential dinner customers. Abby began her closing routine early, wiping down tables and counting the day's meager earnings. Not enough. Never enough these days. She was about to turn the sign to closed when movement caught her eye. A figure hurried across the street, hunched against the increasingly heavy rain. Abby hesitated, her hand on the door lock. 5 more minutes wouldn't make much difference. The door swung open, bringing with it a gust of cold air and rain. The man who stepped inside was clearly not a local. Tall and thin, with several days' worth of stubble and clothes that had seen better days. He stood uncertainly in the entrance, rainwater dripping onto the floor. "Sorry about the mess," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Are you still open?" Something in his eyes made Abby pause. Hunger, yes, but also a deep weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. She recognized it, had seen it in her own mirror these past months. "We're open," she replied, flipping the sign back to open, with a decisiveness that surprised her. "Take a seat wherever you'd like." He chose a corner table partially hidden from the street view. Abby brought him a menu and a glass of water, noting how his hands shook slightly as he reached for it. "The special today is pot roast with vegetables," she offered. "Made fresh this morning." His eyes lit up briefly before dimming again. He cleared his throat. "Actually, I should be honest with you. I can't pay for a meal right now. I thought maybe you needed help cleaning up or something in exchange for some food." The words were clearly difficult for him to say, pride warring with necessity. Abby should say no. The cafe was already struggling, and giving away free meals was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her parents would have understood if she turned him away, but they also would have been the first to feed someone in need. "How about you warm up first?" she said, already turning toward the kitchen. "The pot roast is going to go to waste otherwise." The relief on his face was worth more than whatever the meal would have cost. Abby busied herself in the kitchen, loading a plate with a generous portion of roast mashed potatoes and vegetables. She added a roll and butter, then, after a moment's hesitation, cut a slice of fresh blueberry pie. When she returned, the man was staring out at the rain, lost in thought. He straightened as she set the food before him. "I'm Abby," she said, surprising herself with the introduction. "Robert," he replied. "Robert West." There was the slightest pause before his last name, but Abby didn't comment on it. Everyone had their stories, their reasons for ending up where they were. "Well, Robert West, enjoy your meal. Take your time, I've got cleaning to do anyway." She left him to eat in peace, moving to the kitchen to wash dishes. Through the serving window, she could see him savor each bite, eating slowly as if to make the experience last. There was something about his mannerisms that didn't quite match his appearance. The way he held his fork, the careful way he wiped his mouth with the napkin. Small details that hinted at a different life before this one. Abby's thoughts drifted to her own precarious situation. One bad month, maybe just a few more weeks like today, and she could be the one seeking shelter from the rain, hoping for kindness from strangers. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the weather. When she emerged from the kitchen, Robert had finished his meal. He stood as she approached, genuine gratitude in his eyes. "That was the best meal I've had in a very long time," he said. "I appreciate your kindness more than I can say." Abby waved away his thanks. "My parents always said food tastes better when it's shared." Something flickered across his face, recognition perhaps, or a memory. "Your parents sound like wise people." "They were," she said softly. "They built this place from nothing. Came to America with almost no English and a dream of owning their own business." She hadn't meant to share so much, but something about Robert made it easy to talk. "And now it's yours," he observed, glancing around the cafe with new interest. "For now, at least." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Robert's eyes sharpened, taking in the cafe with a more calculating look. "Times are tough?" Abby sighed. "The new highway, rising costs, fewer tourists. It adds up, but we'll manage. We always do." The familiar lie again, more to convince herself than him. "Sometimes the universe has a way of stepping in when we need it most," Robert said cryptically. "Thank you again for the meal. It meant more than you know." As he turned to leave, Abby impulsively grabbed a paper bag and filled it with 2 muffins and an apple. "For later," she said, pressing it into his hands. Robert accepted the bag with a strange expression, surprise mixed with something else she couldn't quite name. He folded a napkin and placed it on the table before nodding once more in thanks and stepping out into the rain. Abby watched him go, wondering about his story and where he would spend the night. The rain showed no signs of stopping, and the temperature was dropping. For a moment, she considered calling out to him, offering the small storage room as shelter, but he had already disappeared into the darkness. She turned back to the empty cafe, the silence louder than before. On the table where Robert had sat, the folded napkin caught her attention. Probably a simple thank you note, she thought, picking it up. She'd read it later. For now, there were chairs to stack, floors to sweep, as in calculations to make. Tomorrow would be another day of fighting to keep her parents' dream alive. Another day of wondering how long she could hold on before the dream slipped away completely. But tonight, at least, she'd done what they would have wanted. She'd offered kindness to a stranger, shared food with someone in need, and somehow, despite everything, that made the weight on her shoulders just a little lighter to bear. The next morning arrived with clear skies that seemed to mock yesterday's downpour. Abby unlocked the cafe at 5:30 as usual, her body moving through the opening routine on autopilot. Her mind, however, kept drifting back to the stranger from the night before, Robert West. Something about him didn't quite add up. His clothes were worn and his appearance disheveled, but there was a dignity in his manner that spoke of better days. Abby wondered what series of events had brought him to Pine Creek, walking in the rain without enough money for a hot meal. The napkin he'd left behind still sat on the counter where she'd placed it last night, forgotten in her exhaustion. She unfolded it now as the coffee brewed, expecting a simple thank you note. Instead, she found a short message written in an elegant script. Kindness given freely is never wasted. Thank you for reminding me that good people still exist. RW, no dramatic revelation, no hidden money, just heartfelt words. Abby wasn't sure what she'd expected, but the simple gratitude warmed her nonetheless. She tucked the napkin into her pocket as the first customers of the day began to arrive. "Morning, Abby," called Pete, the hardware store owner who came in for breakfast every day at 6 sharp. "Heard you had an interesting visitor last night." Abby raised an eyebrow as she poured his coffee. News traveled fast in Pine Creek. "Just someone passing through." Pete nodded sagely. "Maggie said he looked pretty rough. Brave of you to stay open for a stranger like that." "It was just a meal," Abby replied, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Pete said, his voice serious. "This town needs more folks like you and your parents. Salt of the earth, that's what you are." The compliment stayed with Abby as the morning progressed. Her parents had taught her that a business was about more than profit. It was about community and connection. Even as she worried about making ends meet, she couldn't bring herself to regret feeding Robert. By mid-morning, the cafe had settled into its usual quiet rhythm. Abby was wiping down tables when the bell above the door jingled. She turned, expecting to see one of the regular customers, and instead found herself face to face with Robert West. The difference was striking. Gone was the bedraggled man from the night before. His face was clean-shaven, his hair neatly combed, and he wore simple but clean clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt. He carried a small duffel bag over his shoulder. "Good morning," he said, seeming almost embarrassed by her obvious surprise. "Robert," she managed. "You look different." He smiled slightly. "Amazing what a roof and a hot shower can do. Found a room at the motel down the road." Abby nodded, oddly relieved to know he hadn't spent the night in the rain. "Coffee? On the house." "Actually," he said, setting his bag down, "I was wondering if that offer of work was still available. In exchange for meals, I mean." Abby hesitated. She barely had enough to pay Maggie, let alone take on someone else. But the morning rush was always challenging to handle alone, and an extra pair of hands could free her up to focus on baking, the cafe's main draw. "What kind of work experience do you have?" she asked cautiously. Something flashed in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. "I'm a quick learner. I can wash dishes, clean tables, whatever you need." Abby studied him for a moment. Her instincts told her he wasn't dangerous, just mysterious, and she could use the help. "All right," she decided. "Trial basis. You help during the busy hours and you get breakfast and lunch. Sound fair?" Robert nodded, his expression grateful but also something more. Almost eager, as if this arrangement was exactly what he'd hoped for. "More than fair. When do I start?" "How about now?" Abby handed him an apron. "Lunch rush starts in about an hour. Until then, there's a sink full of breakfast dishes with your name on it." Robert rolled up his sleeves and got to work without complaint. Abby watched him from the corner of her eye as she prepared for lunch. He moved with surprising efficiency, quickly figuring out where things belonged and how the kitchen was organized. Occasionally he would ask a question, but mostly he worked quietly, his focus absolute. Maggie arrived just before noon, raising her eyebrows at the sight of Robert elbow-deep in soapy water. "Well now," she said in a stage whisper to Abby, "this is an interesting development. Extra hands," Abby explained simply. "Just for a few days." Maggie gave her a knowing look that Abby chose to ignore. The older woman had been trying to convince her to hire help for months. No need to admit she might have been right all along. The lunch rush, busier than usual thanks to a meeting at the town hall letting out nearby, proved Robert's worth. He moved seamlessly between washing dishes and bussing tables, anticipating needs before either Abby or Maggie had to ask. Several customers remarked on the new face, but Robert deflected personal questions with polite vagueness that somehow left people satisfied without actually revealing anything about himself. "You've done this before," Abby commented as the rush slowed and they caught their breath. "It wasn't a question," Robert shrugged. "I've had a lot of different jobs over the years." "But this isn't your usual line of work," she pressed, certain now. He met her eyes, something like respect in his gaze. "No," he admitted. "But honest work is honest work, no matter what form it takes." Before she could ask more, the bell jingled again. A middle-aged woman in an expensive-looking suit entered, her eyes scanning the cafe critically. When she spotted Abby, she made a beeline for the counter. "Miss Chen, I'm Diane Powell from First National Bank. We spoke on the phone about your loan extension." Her voice carried in the quiet cafe, making several heads turn. Abby felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Yes, of course. Could we maybe talk in the back?" The banker didn't seem to notice her discomfort. "I'm afraid I don't have time for that. I just stopped by to deliver this in person." She handed Abby an envelope. "The bank has reviewed your application and made its decision. All the details are inside." Without waiting for a response, she turned and left, the bell announcing her departure with the same cheerful tone it gave everyone. Abby stared at the envelope, her stomach knotting. The extension would give her 3 more months to catch up on payments. Without it, bad news. Robert's voice was gentle beside her. She tucked the envelope into her pocket, unwilling to open it in front of customers. "Just business stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." He didn't push, but his eyes remained thoughtful as they finished the lunch service. When the cafe emptied again, Abby finally took a moment to sit down, her legs aching from standing. Robert brought over 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her. "Thank you for today," he said. "The meal last night, the work today, both meant a lot." Abby wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "You earned your keep. Actually, you worked harder than I expected. People often underestimate what others are capable of," he replied with a small smile, "including themselves." The comment hit closer to home than he could know. Since her parents died, Abby had been struggling not just with the cafe's finances, but with her own confidence. Running a business was harder than she'd ever imagined. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly. "Where were you going when you came in last night?" "Pine Creek isn't exactly on the way to anywhere." Robert took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Sometimes people don't know where they're going until they get there." It wasn't really an answer, but something in his tone discouraged further questions. They drank their coffee in companionable silence, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. "I should get those tables ready for dinner," Abby said finally, standing up. Robert rose as well. "Let me help with that, and then I'll get out of your way until tomorrow. If you still want me back, that is." "Be here at 6, she said, surprised by how much she meant it. "Morning rush is even busier than lunch." After Robert left, Abby finally opened the envelope from the bank. The letter inside was brief and to the point. Loan extension denied. Payment in full required within 30 days or foreclosure proceedings would begin. She sank into a chair, the paper trembling in her hands. 30 days. After everything her parents had built, after all their years of hard work, she had 30 days before losing it all. The dinner service passed in a blur of forced smiles and mechanical movements. Abby served food, made small talk, and pretended everything was fine, all while her mind raced through increasingly desperate options. Sell her car? Take out a personal loan? Look for investors who would surely change everything about the cafe her parents had loved. By closing time, she was exhausted in body and spirit. As she wiped down the last table, her gaze fell on the napkin from Robert still in her pocket. Kindness given freely is never wasted. She hoped that was true. Because right now, kindness seemed like the only thing she had left to give. A week passed, then 2. Robert became a fixture at the Blue Bird Cafe, arriving each morning before daylight. When to help Abby prep for the day. His presence had changed things in ways both obvious and subtle. The kitchen ran smoother, the customers seemed more numerous, and despite her financial worries, Abby found herself smiling more often. "You've got quite the helper there," Maggie commented one afternoon as they watched Robert charm an elderly couple with his attentive service. "Never seen someone pick things up so fast." Abby nodded, puzzled as always by the contradictions that made up Robert West. He worked tirelessly, never complaining about the early mornings or the tedious tasks. Yet there were moments. The way he sometimes studied the cafe's accounting books when he thought no one was watching. His careful attention to the business side of conversations that hinted at someone used to very different work. I still don't know a thing about him, Abby admitted. Every time I ask about his past, he changes the subject. Maggie shrugged. Everyone's got secrets. Question is whether they're the kind that matter. The question lingered with Abby as the days passed. Robert had proved himself trustworthy in every way that counted. He showed up when promised, worked harder than expected, and treated every customer with genuine warmth. Whatever his secrets, they didn't seem to be the dangerous kind. The clock was ticking on Abby's 30 days, though. She'd made phone calls, visited other banks, even reached out to distant cousins for loans. Nothing had panned out. With just 10 days left, she was running out of options. She stayed late one night after closing, spreading paperwork across the biggest table in the dining room. Loan statements, utility bills, payroll records, tax forms. The evidence of her failure laid bare under the harsh overhead lights. The sound of the back door opening startled her. Robert appeared a moment later, concern evident on his face. "Thought you might still be here," he said, taking in the paper chaos with a glance. "Brought you some tea?" He set a steaming mug on the table, careful not to disturb her documents. Abby accepted it gratefully, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "Couldn't sleep," she explained unnecessarily. Robert pulled out a chair, his expression questioning. When she nodded, he sat across from her. "Bad news from the bank still weighing on you?" Abby hadn't told him the details, but in a town like Pine Creek, word got around. 10 more days, she said, the words bitter on her tongue. "Then the bank takes everything." Robert studied the papers, his eyes narrowing slightly. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the statements. Too tired to question why a dishwasher would want to review her financials, Abby pushed the papers toward him. "Be my guest. Maybe you'll see something I missed." To her surprise, Robert began organizing the paperwork with practiced ease, creating neat stacks by category. He asked occasional questions about interest rates, terms of the original loan, monthly operating costs, that revealed a depth of financial knowledge completely at odds with his current position. "Who are you, really?" Abby asked finally, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Robert looked up, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Does it matter?" "It might," she countered. "You're not just some guy down on his luck. The way you understand these numbers, the questions you ask, you've run a business before, haven't you?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "A lifetime ago, maybe." He tapped one of the bank statements. "What matters now is that your cafe isn't actually failing. Your product is excellent, your customer service outstanding, and your location still viable despite the highway changes." "Then why can't I make the payments?" Abby challenged. "Because the loan terms are predatory," he said simply. "The interest rate is at least 2 points higher than market, and these processing fees are completely arbitrary. First National is notorious for these tactics with small businesses." Abby stared at him. "How could you possibly know that?" Robert hesitated, then sighed. "Let's just say I've seen these practices before. From the inside." Before she could press further, he stood up. "It's late. You should get some rest. Things have a way of looking clearer in the morning." Abby wanted to argue, to demand real answers, but exhaustion won out. "Fine, but this conversation isn't over." Robert paused at the door, his expression softening. "No, I don't suppose it is. Good night, Abby." The next morning brought unexpected sunshine and an even more unexpected visitor. Abby was just unlocking the front door when a sleek black car pulled up outside. A woman in her 60s stepped out, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob, her clothing casual but clearly expensive. "We're not open yet," Abby called, assuming the woman was a tourist passing through. "I'm not here for coffee," the woman replied, approaching with confident steps. "I'm looking for Robert West. I was told I might find him here." Abby's surprise must have shown on her face because the woman smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm Eleanor Harrington, Robert's sister-in-law." The name Harrington tickled something in Abby's memory, but she couldn't place it. "Robert's in the kitchen. Would you like me to get him?" "Please," Eleanor said, glancing around the cafe with interest. "This is a charming place." Abby hurried to the back where Robert was already prepping breakfast ingredients. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "A woman named Eleanor Harrington. She says she's your sister-in-law." The knife in Robert's hand stilled. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely rattled. "Eleanor is here now? Should I tell her to come back later?" Robert set down the knife carefully. No, I should talk to her." He wiped his hands on a towel, his movements measured. "Abby, I'm sorry. I should have been more forthcoming about many things. Who are you?" she asked again, this time with more urgency. "It's a long story," he said, "and one I promised to tell you. But I need to speak with Eleanor first." Abby nodded reluctantly. She returned to the dining room where Eleanor was examining the family photos on the wall. "Your parents?" she asked, gesturing to a picture of Abby's mom and dad on opening day, their faces alight with pride and hope. "Yes," Abby confirmed. "They started the Bluebird 20 years ago." "They created something special," Eleanor said with genuine admiration. "You can feel the love in this place." Before Abby could respond, Robert emerged from the kitchen. The change in Eleanor was immediate. Her composed demeanor crumbled as she rushed to him, enveloping him in a tight hug. 3 months, Bobby," she said, her voice thick with emotion. 3 months without a word. "Do you have any idea what we've been through?" Robert returned the hug awkwardly, his eyes meeting Abby's over Eleanor's shoulder. "I know, Ellie, I'm sorry. I needed time." Eleanor pulled back, studying his face. "Time is one thing. Disappearing is another." She glanced at his apron. "And what exactly are you doing washing dishes in a small-town cafe?" "Finding some perspective," Robert replied quietly. Eleanor's expression softened. "Well, at least you're all right. That's what matters." She turned to include Abby. "I apologize for the intrusion. When our investigator finally located Robert, I came immediately." "Investigator?" Abby echoed, feeling increasingly out of her depth. "Perhaps we should sit down," Robert suggested, gesturing to a nearby table. "There's a lot to explain." The next hour passed in a blur for Abby as the full story emerged. Robert West was actually Robert Harrington, co-founder of Harrington Capital, one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. Following the death of his brother and business partner in a sailing accident, Robert had walked away from everything, needing space to grieve and reevaluate his life. "The company is in chaos," Eleanor explained. "The board is threatening to force a sale if you don't return soon." Robert ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Abby now recognized as a sign of his discomfort. "The company survived without Charles. It can survive without me." "That's not the point," Eleanor insisted. "Charles believed in what you built together. Letting it fall apart or be sold off to vultures, that's not honoring his memory." The conversation continued, touching on board meetings and shareholder votes, a world so far removed from Abby's daily concerns that it hardly seemed real. She sat quietly, trying to reconcile the man who had washed her dishes and served her customers with this wealthy financier who casually discussed millions of dollars in assets. Eventually, Eleanor glanced at her watch. "I have a flight back this afternoon. Will you at least think about returning, Bobby? For Charles, if not for yourself?" Robert nodded slowly. "I'll think about it, but I need to finish something here first." After Eleanor left, an awkward silence fell between Abby and Robert. The cafe should have opened 30 minutes ago, but neither moved to unlock the door. "So," Abby said finally. "Robert Harrington. I should have told you," he admitted. "At first I just needed anonymity. Then as I got to know you in the cafe, He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "You what?" "I felt useful again," he said simply. "Not as the CEO who signs checks or makes decisions that affect stock prices. Just as someone who shows up, works hard, and makes a small difference every day." Abby studied him, seeing both the mysterious dishwasher and the powerful businessman in the same face. "What happens now?" Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, placing it on the table between them. It was a key, old-fashioned and brass with an intricate design on its head. "What's this?" Abby asked. "A key to a safe deposit box," Robert replied. "At First National Bank. I think you'll find what's inside very interesting." Abby stared at the key, a strange feeling washing over her. Something told her that nothing would ever be the same once she turned that key. She reached for it hesitantly, half expecting it to disappear like a mirage. But the key was solid and real in her palm, just like the man across from her, who had appeared in the rain one night and somehow changed everything. Abby stood in front of First National Bank the following morning, the brass key heavy in her pocket. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with questions about Robert and what might be waiting in that safe deposit box. Part of her wanted to throw the key away, to reject whatever charity Robert was offering. Another part desperately needed a miracle to save her parents' cafe. The same bank that was ready to take everything from her might now hold the solution to her problems. The irony wasn't lost on her. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the revolving door. The bank's interior was all polished marble and dark wood, designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure. A few customers milled about conducting their morning business with tellers. Diane Powell, the banker who had delivered the foreclosure notice, spotted Abby immediately. Her professionally neutral expression couldn't quite hide her surprise. "Ms. Chen, I didn't expect to see you today." Her tone implied that Abby had no business being there unless she was bringing a check for the full loan amount. Abby straightened her shoulders. "I need access to a safe deposit box." Diane's eyebrows rose slightly. "You don't have a safe deposit box with us." "Not mine," Abby clarified, pulling out the key. "I have this key and authorization to access a box." She produced the paper Robert had given her that morning, a formal letter on Harrington Capital Stationery, signed and notarized, granting her full access to box number 713. Diane's demeanor changed instantly when she saw the Harrington name. "Of course, Miss Chen, right this way, please." The transformation was almost comical. The same woman who had coldly delivered news of the cafe's impending doom now led Abby to the vault with deferential politeness. Harrington was clearly a name that opened doors even in Pine Creek. Inside the vault, Diane used her master key along with Abby's to open box 713. "I'll give you some privacy," she said, stepping outside but leaving the door ajar as bank policy required. Alone with the metal box, Abby hesitated. Whatever Robert had left for her, it would change things between them forever. The simple relationship of cafe owner and helpful employee was already gone, replaced by something more complicated. This would push it further into uncharted territory. She lifted the lid. Inside lay a single manila envelope, her name written across it in Robert's now familiar handwriting. No bundles of cash, no dramatic solution, just an envelope. Disappointment and relief mingled as she picked it up. The envelope was sealed. Abby broke it open and pulled out several pages of legal documents along with a handwritten note. "Abby," the note began, "I owe you an apology and an explanation. When I came to Pine Creek, I was running away from my life and my responsibilities. The loss of my brother had left me questioning everything I thought I knew about what matters. Your kindness that first night, offering food to a stranger with nothing to give in return, reminded me of a simple humanity I'd lost touch with in the world of high finance. I stayed because I saw in you and the Bluebird Cafe something worth protecting, a place of genuine connection in a world that increasingly lacks it. The documents enclosed represent my attempt to make amends for my deception while preserving what you and your parents built. This is not charity. It's investment in something valuable. Whatever you decide, thank you for reminding me what matters. Robert." Abby set the note aside and examined the legal papers. The first was a deed of ownership for the cafe building and land, not a copy but the original. According to the document, Robert had purchased the property from First National Bank the previous day, settling the loan in full. The second document was even more surprising. Partnership papers naming Abby as the majority owner, 75% of the Bluebird Cafe, with Robert Harrington as a silent partner, 25%. The third was a business plan for expanding the cafe, including detailed financial projections, marketing strategies, and options for growth. Abby sat back, her mind spinning. Robert had saved the cafe from foreclosure, yes, but he'd done it in a way that left her in control. Not a handout, but a partnership. Not a takeover, but a collaboration. She gathered the documents and left the vault, nodding a thank you to Diane as she passed. Outside on the sidewalk, Abby took her first deep breath in what felt like weeks. The weight of impending failure had lifted, replaced by something new. Possibility. Back at the cafe, she found Robert in the kitchen, preparing for lunch as if nothing had changed. As if he hadn't just rewritten her future. "You bought the building," she said without preamble. Robert looked up from the vegetables he was chopping. "Yes. And made me your business partner. Technically, you're my boss, he corrected with a small smile. Majority ownership. Abby shook her head, struggling to understand. Why? You don't even know me. Robert set down his knife, giving her his full attention. I know enough. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you treat your employees and customers like family. I know you maintained your integrity even when it would have been easier not to. He gestured around the kitchen. And I know this place matters not just to you but to this community. So this is what? Your good deed? Your way of feeling better about your privileged life? The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but Robert didn't flinch. Maybe at first, he admitted. But not anymore. Now it's about recognizing value and investing in it. That's what I've always been good at. Abby leaned against the counter, trying to process everything. I don't know if I can accept this. You don't have to, Robert said simply. The deed is in your name. The partnership agreement needs your signature to be valid. You can tear it up right now if that's what you want. The choice was unexpected. She had assumed the deal was done, that she would have no say in the matter. The fact that Robert was giving her a genuine choice made her reconsider her initial reaction. What happens if I say yes? You go back to your real life and I never see you again? Something flashed in Robert's eyes, surprise perhaps, or something deeper. Is that what you want? I'm asking what you want, Abby countered. You have a company to run, a life to get back to. Playing dishwasher in a small-town cafe can't be your long-term plan. Robert was quiet for a moment. When my brother died, he said finally, I lost more than a business partner. I lost the person who kept me grounded, who reminded me why we started Harrington Capital in the first place. To build things that last, to invest in potential others couldn't see. He met her eyes directly. Working here, I've remembered what that feels like. The kitchen door swung open before Abby could respond. Maggie entered, already tying on her apron. Am I interrupting something? She asked, looking between them. No, Abby said quickly. We were just discussing some business. Maggie raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Well, while you two were discussing business, the lunch crowd started showing up. Lines forming out front. We'll be right there, Robert assured her. After Maggie left, Abby straightened up, making a decision. Let's get through lunch. Then we can talk about what happens next. The lunch rush was busier than usual, word having spread that something was happening at the Bluebird. Small towns thrived on gossip, and the appearance of a wealthy stranger combined with a visit to the bank had set tongues wagging. Abby fielded curious questions with vague replies. Not ready to explain a situation she was still trying to understand herself. Through it all, Robert worked alongside her as he had for the past weeks. Attentive, efficient, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Whatever else he might be, millionaire, business tycoon, grieving brother. He was also someone who understood the rhythm of the cafe and his place in it. As the last lunch customers departed, Abby found herself watching Robert as he cleared tables. The easy way he chatted with Maggie, the care he took with the cafe's worn dishes, the genuine smile he offered to everyone. None of that seemed fake. The man who had shown up in the rain might have been hiding his identity, but he hadn't been hiding his character. You're staring, Maggie commented suddenly beside her. Abby blushed. Just thin. King. About our mysterious dishwasher who isn't really a dishwasher. When Abby looked surprised, Maggie chuckled. Small town, honey. News travels. Heard he's some big shot from the city. Something like that, Abby admitted. Maggie glanced at Robert, then back at Abby. Well, whatever he is, he's good people. Don't see that changing just because his bank account has more zeros than ours. The simple wisdom in Maggie's words struck home. Robert's money and position had been hidden, but his actions had been real from the start. From that first night when he'd offered to work in exchange for a meal, he'd shown who he truly was. After Maggie left for the day, Abby and Robert sat at the same table where they'd had coffee that first afternoon. The partnership agreement lay between them unsigned. I have conditions, Abby said, surprising herself with her boldness. Robert leaned back, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. I'm listening. First, this stays the Bluebird Cafe. No corporate rebranding, no chain restaurant conversion. It keeps its soul? Agreed, Robert said without hesitation. That's non-negotiable for me too. Second, Maggie and any other staff stay on with better benefits. Health insurance, paid time off, the works. Already factored into the business plan, Robert assured her. Happy employees make for a successful business. Abby took a deep breath before continuing. Third, we expand the pay what you can policy, 1 day a week at least. No one should go hungry if we can help it. This time Robert's smile bloomed fully. Now you're thinking like a true Harrington Capital partner. Invest in your community and the returns come back tenfold. And finally, Abby said, her voice softening slightly, you don't disappear. Silent partner or not, you've become part of this place. Robert's expression grew serious. I have responsibilities I can't ignore anymore. Eleanor was right about that. But, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I think there's room in my life for both worlds now. If you'll have me. Abby considered this man who had entered her life as a stranger and was now offering a partnership that extended beyond business. The decision should have felt monumental, life-changing. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She picked up the pen and signed her name. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through new windows, casting warm light across the expanded dining room of the Bluebird Cafe. Where once there had been just a dozen tables, now there were 20, each one full of customers enjoying breakfast. The buzz of conversation and the clink of silverware created the perfect backdrop to another busy day. Abby moved between tables, greeting regulars by name, and welcoming newcomers with the same warmth her parents had always shown. The past year had brought changes she could never have imagined that rainy night when a stranger walked through her door. Order up for table 7, called Hank, the new head cook they'd hired 3 months ago. He slid 2 plates of blueberry pancakes onto the counter, the fresh fruit glistening with maple syrup. Thanks, Hank, Abby replied, balancing the plates with practiced ease. She delivered them to an older couple visiting from out of state, drawn by the cafe's growing reputation for homemade food and hometown hospitality. The bell above the door jangled, and Abby looked up to see Maggie enter. Though she wasn't due to start her shift for another hour, the older woman beamed as she made her way through the crowded dining room. It came, Maggie announced, waving a magazine. Just hit the stands this morning. She placed the magazine on the counter with a flourish. On the cover was a beautiful photograph of the Bluebird Cafe, sunlight catching the new blue awnings and flower boxes. The headline read, Small Town Treasures, America's Best Hidden Gem Cafes. Page 32, Maggie said, already flipping through the pages. Abby leaned over to see a full-page spread about the Bluebird, complete with photos of the interior and some of their signature dishes. The article praised the cafe's blend of traditional and innovative cuisine, its commitment to local sourcing, and most notably, its Giving Tuesday program, where customers could pay what they could afford or nothing at all every Tuesday. Look at that, Maggie said, pointing to a paragraph near the end. They quoted me. Sure enough, there was Maggie's name alongside her description of the cafe as the heart of Pine Creek, beating stronger than ever. Abby felt a lump form in her throat. Her parents would have been so proud to see their little cafe featured in a national magazine. She could almost see her father's broad smile, her mother's quiet nod of satisfaction. The kitchen door swung open and Robert emerged, dressed in his usual button-down shirt and slacks, his concession to being a businessman again, though he still refused to wear a tie when in Pine Creek. He carried a tray of fresh-baked muffins, placing them in the display case before noticing the gathering at the counter. It's here, he asked, spotting the magazine. Abby nodded, still too moved to speak. Robert glanced at the article, his eyes scanning the text quickly. They got it right, he said with satisfaction. Captured exactly what makes this place special. Over the past year, Robert had kept his promise. While resuming his role as CEO of Harrington Capital, he had also remained deeply involved with the Bluebird. He spent at least 1 week each month in Pine Creek, working alongside Abby and the staff, attending town meetings, and becoming part of the community in a way he never had in his corporate life. The photographer did a great job, Maggie commented. Though I still say he should have included a picture of you two, the brains behind the operation. Robert smiled. The cafe is the star, not us. That's how it should be. The bell jangled again and Eleanor Harrington walked in, elegant as always, even in casual clothes. Her visits had become more frequent over the months, her initial skepticism about Robert's country life having given way to genuine appreciation for Pine Creek and the Bluebird. Morning, everyone, she greeted, taking a seat at the counter. Did the magazine arrive? Just came in, Abby confirmed, pouring Eleanor's usual tea without being asked. Want to see? In a minute, Eleanor said, sipping her tea. First, I have news from the board meeting yesterday. Robert raised an eyebrow. Good news or bad news? Very good news, Eleanor assured him. The Harrington Foundation proposal passed unanimously. Full funding approved. A smile broke across Robert's face, the kind of unguarded joy that had become more common over the past year. That's fantastic, Abby felt a flutter of excitement. The Harrington Foundation had been Robert's pet project for months, a non-profit organization designed to help small businesses in rural communities. Inspired by the Bluebird's journey, it would provide low-interest loans, business education, and mentorship to entrepreneurs who might otherwise be overlooked by traditional banks. Congratulations, she told Robert, squeezing his hand briefly. I know how much this means to you. To us, he corrected gently. Your input shaped the whole concept. It was true. What had started as casual conversations over after-hours coffee had evolved into passionate discussions about how to replicate the Bluebird success in other struggling communities. Abby had contributed ideas based on her parents' experiences and her own, while Robert had provided the business framework and financial backing to make it happen. When do we start? Abby asked. We already have, Eleanor replied, pulling a tablet from her bag. Applications began coming in as soon as the press release went out this morning. 17 so far, including a bakery in Vermont, a bookstore in New Mexico, and a family-run hardware store in Michigan. As Eleanor scrolled through the applications, Abby felt a wave of pride. Their partnership had grown far beyond saving one cafe in one small town. It was now reaching across the country, touching lives they would never even meet. The morning rush began to slow, giving Abby a moment to step back and observe the cafe in its entirety. The original space her parents had lovingly built was still there, preserved in the heart of the expanded building. New elements: the community bulletin board covered in local notices, the small lending library in the corner, the showcase of local artists' work on the walls, had enhanced rather than replaced what made the Bluebird special. Robert joined her, following her gaze around the room. Penny for your thoughts? Just thinking about how much has changed, she replied. And how much hasn't? He nodded in understanding. Over the months, their relationship had deepened beyond business partners to something neither of them had put a label on yet. There was no rush. Like the cafe itself, what existed between them had room to grow at its own pace. Your parents would be proud, Robert said softly. Not just of the cafe, but of you. How you've taken their dream and made it even bigger. Abby felt tears prick at her eyes. I wish they could see it. I think maybe they can, Robert replied, surprising her. He wasn't usually one for sentimental notions. Their spirit is in every corner of this place. In the recipes, in the way you greet every customer, in the values that guide every decision. Before Abby could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Hank appeared, looking slightly panicked. We've got a situation, he said. The delivery truck just showed up with only half our produce order. Says there was a mix-up at the warehouse. I'll handle it, Abby assured him, already shifting into problem-solving mode. We both will, Robert added, reaching for his phone. I know the regional manager. As they worked together to solve the latest in a long line of daily challenges that came with running a cafe, Abby reflected on how natural their partnership had become. Where once she might have seen Robert's wealth and connections as intimidating, or his help as charity, now she recognized the truth. They were stronger together, each bringing different strengths to the table. By late afternoon, the produce crisis had been resolved, lunch had been served and cleared away, and preparations for dinner were underway. Abby finally took a moment to slip away to her small office, once a storage closet, now a tidy space with just enough room for a desk and 2 chairs. On the wall hung a framed napkin, the one Robert had left behind that first night, with his message about kindness given freely. Beside it was a photograph taken on the day of the cafe's grand reopening 6 months ago, showing the entire staff gathered in front of the freshly painted building, their faces alight with hope and excitement. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to find Robert standing there, his suit jacket abandoned, sleeves rolled up as they always were when he was in cafe mode rather than CEO mode. Got a minute? He asked. For you? Always. The answer came easily now. The trust between them built day by day over shared work and shared dreams. Robert sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what's next for the Bluebird." "What do you mean?" Abby asked, curious. "The magazine feature just came out. The foundation is launching. Isn't that enough for now?" He smiled. "More than enough. But I've learned from you that it's never too early to start dreaming bigger." He placed a folder on her desk. Some ideas for a community kitchen. Cooking classes, job training, space for local food entrepreneurs to develop products without the overhead of their own facilities. Abby opened the folder, scanning the preliminary plans. It was exactly the kind of project she'd mentioned wanting to pursue someday, when the cafe was on more solid footing. "This looks amazing. But can we afford it?" "That's the best part," Robert said, his eyes lighting up with the enthusiasm that always appeared when he talked about building something new. "The Foundation's first official grant recipient? The Bluebird Cafe Community Kitchen Initiative." Abby laughed. "Isn't that a conflict of interest?" "Not at all," he replied with mock seriousness. The application was evaluated by an independent committee who found it exemplified exactly the kind of community-focused, sustainable business model the Foundation aims to support. "And who appointed this independent committee?" "Details," Robert dismissed with a wave of his hand, then grew more serious. "The truth is, Abby, what you've created here has become the blueprint, the model we want others to follow. Why not continue to lead the way?" The weight of his words settled over her. From nearly losing everything to becoming an example for others to follow, the journey seemed impossible. Yet here they were. "A year ago," she said slowly, "I couldn't see a future for this place beyond the next 30 days. Now we're planning years ahead." Robert's expression softened. "A year ago, I couldn't see a future for myself at all. Funny how things change when the right person serves you dinner on a rainy night." Outside the office window, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over Pine Creek. The cafe hummed with the sounds of preparation for the dinner service. Life continued its steady rhythm, unchanged yet utterly transformed by one simple act of kindness that had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. "So," Robert asked, "ready for whatever comes next?" Abby smiled, thinking of her parents, of the cafe's journey, of the unexpected gift that had walked through her door that rainy night. One decision to feed a hungry stranger had changed everything. "Absolutely," she said. "Let's get started."